Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Business as Activism podcast. I am so happy you're here. I am your host, feminist leadership coach and mentor, Elijah Selby, pronouns she, her. I live, work, and play on the traditional unceded territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples who have stewarded this land throughout generations, who continue to steward this land. My guest today is Jillian Todd. And Jillian Todd is a business and money coach, helping creative entrepreneurs build wealth in a fun and shame-free way. Her passion is helping people transform their relationship with money, proving you don't have to choose between doing what you love and making great money. How awesome is that? Welcome, Jillian. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. I feel like it's like I'm struggling to stay quiet. We've already talked so much, and I'm like,
I
yes, I'm
know.
so excited to dive right in.
Yay! Anybody that listens to the podcast knows I always like
Yeah,
chat before we hit record. And so Jillian and I have already had an exciting conversation that I know we both want to dive into. I think
yeah,
we can say that. Okay, so let's dive in. I love, when you first wrote to me, um, you spoke about this idea of the starving artist and the fact that it doesn't need to be that way. So let's have that as our jumping off point. And I think, as you and I discussed, right, so many people, not just artists themselves, certainly artists themselves, and then I would say the community at large, or our culture at large, buys into that stereotype a lot of the times. So
yeah,
what do we want to know? How do we want to
yeah.
think about this? How can we
I
start
love.
dismantling this bullshit?
Yeah, let's tear it up. Yes, I love this conversation. I've shared with you before we started recording that this came really top of mind, and really like a gratitude moment. I was on a walk with my partner. We saw some beautiful mural art, and I was like, oh, "It's so beautiful." We were admiring it, and they were like, "Yeah, it's like such a shame that they're like not paid that well for like the incredible work that they do." And I was like, "That's not necessarily true." And then I was like, "Actually, I know so many rich artists, you know." And so it like brought to me this like, and I'm like, as I'm telling that story, and as I said it then too, like I got goosebumps because I think it's something that like not a lot of people can say and it feel true in the moment. Like we all have like, I don't know if you're woo woo like me, you have affirmations and you have things that you want to believe. But for me, like I personally know so many rich artists, so many artists who are doing well, providing for themselves, for their family, living incredible lives, doing the work, doing like the art that they love. And so like, I just love it so much. And I think anything that I can do to kind of change that narrative and like show people the opposite side is like everything to me.
What do you think? Do you think these people, these artists that you know, was there a transformation for them of like, I'm the starving artist and now I'm not the starving artist, or I have to think of money differently? And like, what was that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have our drama with money. I'm a money coach, so I talk to people about their drama with money all of the time. But I think a lot of people, were raised, especially in the society of like pursue money first, pursue stability first, and for sure, some of us have more privilege than others, and like we really do need like I'm looking for that financial stability. Like that's why I'm an accountant today. It's because I chose accounting and business because I was like I can go to school and make great money and support myself with this career. And so I think for a lot of people to pursue art, they kind of look at it as and we talked about this too, like a zero sum game of like, okay, I'm choosing art. That means I am giving up financial stability or I'm giving up
Right.
the ability to be quote unquote successful financially. And that's not true.
Mm. Yeah. So, and I just want to honor too, like I always think about the fact, yeah, we need to pay the rent. So one of the things about money and our relationship with money, whether we're an artist or a healer or a coach or somebody who is an activist, because I think um, that plays into this mindset sometimes, not so much coaching, maybe it depends, but healing, activism, nonprofit work, artists, maybe actors, which are also artists. So how, how do they break out of that? How do we break out of that? How do we help people break out of that? Because it's so limiting and so small. And also, we want these people's work to come to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's, like I said, everyone's money drama is a little bit different. I think there's a lot around like worth. There's a lot around like I'll just name like kind of like the top big bad actors I would say that I see people have. It's like um I'm doing work that I love. So it's like do work you love or make great money. So like I'm doing great work. So I don't need to make good money because I'm fulfilled in my life or something like that. There's the nobility piece of like, I think that's also kind of tied into the worth piece of like, no, it's more noble to donate donate my time, not make that much money financially because I'm contributing to the art, I'm contributing in another way. Not to say that you can't do both. Then we have people who like it ties to their money family story, so their family was maybe judgmental of people who made a lot of money, or the opposite side, they come from like a well-off comfortable family, and they're like, I am not like them. I don't want to be like them. I want to be with people. So I think what I usually lead people to is like starting to look at some of those like historic money stories. Like really good exercise I always tell clients is like, what's like your first one or two memories around money? Is it your mom saying something offhand to your dad about the grocery bill? Is it when you got your first allowance? Because I think when you start to work through those like stories, you might notice like, oh, that's interesting, that little thought there. Like when I did this exercise myself, I was a kid who like had money burned a hole in my pocket. It's like something my mom would say to me, which is like I would get my allowance and I'd spend it all on candy. I loved candy a lot when I was a little kid. And so for me, that I like internalized like, oh, I'm not good with money. Like if you give money to me, I'm going to spend it. I'm going to do it irresponsibly. And so that led to me actually later in life, like pushing money away because I didn't want the opportunity to like ruin it or spend it in a way that was not appropriate, or, like judging myself before I even had it. So like really analyzing those money stories, I would say, is like the first part. And then how I kind of get people to change those beliefs is like really tying it to your current values. So like, what do you really value? Is it community? Is it generosity? Is it giving back? And how can your relationship with money support those values instead of like take you away from those values?
Oh, I love that so much. Oh my gosh. So much to say. I want to say also, like, as we're trying to change the world, I always think we have one foot in the reality of this world, which is a capitalist uh, culture, which we have to pay rent and buy food and clothing, and that's just the reality of our world. So I've talked to people that want to totally shun everything, which by the way, I completely identify with. And also just understanding the weird reality of change. I think, anyway, I'm certainly welcome to change my mind on this, but I feel like we have one foot in the reality of this world and then one foot in the world that we're trying to create. And I feel like that kind of matches a little bit like, here's the world you grew up in. Here's the stories you were told. By the way, I deeply identify with your money story. It was never verbally said to me, but it was modeled for me. And I didn't even realize it. I'll just share this with everybody. Maybe people will resonate that I would get money in the bank and I would spend it. I really found a hard time saving, but wasn't aware of it. Let me just say I was super not mindful or conscious of what that was happening, of the fact that that was happening. So it's like until I figured that out and that I had that weird habit, and maybe I'm not even totally sure where it comes from. Like I do know some messaging I got, but that like I would just like get rid of it because like maybe I'm not good with money or something. So until I got aware of that, I couldn't change that. So I just love that. Thank you. And that this idea that it's rooted in values feels so exciting to me. So exciting because if I always say, like, if the money's going anywhere, I want it to be with the healers of the world, right? How different would this world look if people that brought art and love and beauty and peace and justice to this world had the money, you know? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
yeah.
exciting. I just got the chills.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it so much. And like to your same point, like very recently on Instagram. I was like, someone asked me like, "What are you like? What's your favorite thing to splurge on?" And I was like, "Travel," but I also like generosity is one of my top values. I love to give big tips, to spend money on artists. Anytime I'm seeing like someone like having like a flash sale or like, I love to give money away. And so like very similar stories to you, which I love diving into this, but like something for me. And so I still give. I've always been a kind of person like, if I've got cash in my pocket and I see someone asking for money on the road, I'm going to give it to them 10 out of 10 times. Um, and so for me, it was like the generosity piece, the wanting to support artists was always there. What I had to really work on and to grow was like my own self love and self worth piece of it, because like the generosity to others was there, but I wasn't being generous with myself. I was over giving. I was not taking care of myself. I was harboring guilt for like making a good living, having a business, being quote unquote successful. And so to kind of like reduce or like, I don't know, mitigate that guilt, I was over giving, which didn't come from a good place. Yes, it was like helping people, but it was hurting myself. And so now that I've actually kind of like done some of that self love, self worth work, I make more money. I can give some away, and I'm not giving it away and being like, well, that's going to be uncomfortable because now it's going to be tight for rent and groceries next month. I can give and give freely and not ever worry about how it's going to come back to me. And that feels so much better than how it felt before, even though I was doing the same thing, which is giving, donating, being of community, being of service, because it is a big value to me. I had to kind of bring that other piece up so it felt reciprocal.
Oh, that's such an important point. Like, essentially, what I'm hearing you say is this core value of generosity, which I deeply understand, having been in the service industry, actually myself for a long time, and just it's fun. Like, I get that so deeply, but that you were actually in practicing that value, you were doing it to the extent such that you were actually causing harm to yourself. So I think that that's such an important point for all of us. That feels like a real light bulb for me. So we hear a lot in activism, like this idea of reducing harm or causing no harm. And do we ever think of ourselves and the harm we cause ourselves? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it with clients all the time as well. Like they really
Mm.
value accessibility or they really value community and they don't want to take advantage or like cause harm. Um, and so like it is kind of like a process of like finding like what feels both good to you, right? Because if it doesn't, if it's like you're crawling out of your skin every time you say your pricing to someone in your store, you're probably not really going to sell anything. So like finding that balance between like what feels good for you today and like what feels successful for you today and like where you want to go, and what you want to be doing. Cause I think, yeah, for a lot of my clients, it's the same thing. They really value accessibility. They really value community. And there's so many ways to have those values, to support those values that aren't of detriment to yourself. Like if you're spending, I have a ceramicist client and she's beautiful works. But if you're working in the studio for 5 hours on something that's a beautiful piece of art, and then you're selling it for $100, and you also have like your rent, your utilities, your taxes, your sales tax, like you're not really paying yourself. And so even though it feels accessible to like give it at a certain price, we also have to look at, you know, just like everything, there's systems at play. There's systems in your business. You have to look at other ways that you can make sure your own needs are met so that you can continue doing it. Because if you're, burning out, not making any money, causing harm to yourself, then yes, you're accessible today, but you're probably not going to be around in business in 2 years. So we have to look at the long term and the short term and
Right.
like what feels good now and also like working towards that like sustainability for you in the business.
And what strikes me as you're saying that at its core is this is about learning to be good with money. And I have this intuitive sense or a thread that I can't quite see the end of, but that there's, I suspect this connection of idea of needing to be good with money. If somebody has a judgment, and we talked a little bit about this, and let's go judgment about people that have money. So if I think rich people are assholes and douchebags and scum and whatever else, I don't know, whatever my story is about that, then that's of course affecting my how much I bring in, I think. But also then it might be, this is the thread, it might be affecting my ability to look at my money, manage my money, be good with my money, because maybe there's a fear inside of me that says that means I'm like them and I don't want to be like them and I'm just going to manifest or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, we love the binary and and the patriarchy especially. And I think it plays out in a lot of different ways. I call it like the pendulum, and I see all of my clients do it. I do it. We all do it. So we're like here in, and if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see this. We're over on the left side and we are quote unquote starving artists. We are giving away our work for free. We are overworking, undercharging, and I kind of see this manifest two ways. So you either like get burned out and sick of it, and you're like, I'm going way over here. I'm tripling all of my prices. I'm looking for more affluent clients. Like I'm totally going like the quote unquote sellout way of like high volume, low volume, high price. I'm just like leaving the starving artist mentality behind. I'm like rejecting it basically, and I'm going to be over here now. Or people want to do the opposite and like they're like, I am here, I am overworking, undercharging, and I don't want to be like that. And so it kind of keeps you in like whatever camp you're in. It keeps you in this like very tight, not really made for anyone binary, when what's true for you is probably, and again we see this time and time again with like coaching when looking at the binary, is like what's true is not one end or the other. What's true for you is probably somewhere in the middle, and like you're going to be on that spectrum, and it depends on your values, it depends on what's important to you, it depends on your lifestyle, it depends on if you're supporting a family, it depends on how much time you have, it depends on what kind of like modality you're doing, if you're an actor, if you're a painter, if you're a ceramicist, if you're a musician. Like all of these things make play a part in where you're going to be on that binary. And it's only when you can like de what do I want to say, like not hold so tightly to one idea or the other, but say like, okay, where on this binary, what pieces of this feel true to me, and how can I let go and maybe not identify so closely with like the starving artist or like the like luxury VIP, maybe like gosh, what I want to say, like maybe sellout artists.
Right. Well, okay. So much to say. It feels like when we have a judgment, this is shadow work essentially. So I have a judgment that rich people are XYZ. I don't want to be that. So I'm going to go all the way over here and be small and work really hard and give away things and struggle. So, yeah. And let's talk a little bit about artists, because I love so much what you were saying again before we hit record. So there is that one end of the spectrum of the starving artist, and then there's the quote unquote sellout. And then there's the like, it's not even a middle ground, because it's like if it's the spectrum, it's infinite, right? There's infinite possibilities here. Yeah. So what do you see? Because I know you have a lot here.
Yeah, and I think this is why it really comes to like values. Like what, and I think this is also something that people really struggle with, and I'd say especially like women, non-binary people, people who are just kind of like not the traditional white cis man. Like what do you want? Which is really hard for people. And so like I try not to ask that even directly because it can like put so many walls up, but and so I think it's more important to start with like what are your values? What would feel comfortable to you? And starting, you got to start small and small and small, and then it grows into, yeah, what would be fucking awesome? What would be your wildest dream? But I think, especially when you're coming from this place where you're like, I'm a starving artist and I have, I feel noble because of it, and I'm really tied to the struggle. It's almost insane for me to ask you, like, what's your wildest dream? If you want to make $1 million with this business, because you're like, no, are
Yeah.
you kidding me?
No.
Are you insane?
Yeah, that's going to be so outside the realm of possibility. Their system's going to be talk about like nervous system deregulation at that point. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So for all the coaches listening, I just want to say that's so brilliant and beautiful. That start small, and that question of what do you want? I ask that all the time. And so you just really taught me something. Thank you. Because I do think it's the hardest thing for our clients to answer sometimes. And that question that I learned, maybe so many of us learned in coaching school, that like, if you had a magic wand, you know, I know I have felt stressed. I can, even in this moment, just saying that out loud, feel stressed. Like, I don't know. I, I don't know what I want. So I love this idea of starting with values. That's so beautiful. It's so, so beautiful. And then it also feels really grounding again. So just thinking about money, just thinking about all our stories. Why is money actually, why is money, why does it stir our pot so much? What is it about money that I don't know anybody that doesn't have money stories? I don't know a single person that doesn't have money stories that they have to deal with. Like, why? Do you have a sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I can tell you my theory. I'm sure there are very other smart people who've studied it professionally who can tell you, but I can tell you my theory. My theory is money is so it's tied to everything, right? Every single thing we touch has a monetary value. It is tied to our jobs and our culture. It's tied to our quote unquote worth. I even hate to say it like that because it's not really tied to our worth, but it is for so many people. Um, and it's also so secretive. So something that is really important to me and that I see over and over again is that secrets cause a lot of harm for a lot of people. There's no like normalization of it. So like think about who you talk about money with. You probably talked about it with your parents, but even not really. You watched your parents interact with money. You don't really talk about it with your friends. You talk about it with your partner, but it's a high stress thing with a lot of people and their partners. You don't talk about it at work. You talk about it with HR, who is like almost like seen as your adversary. You're like negotiating against them. So there's not a lot of ways for or a lot of spaces, I'll say, for people to heal those relationships with money because it's so keep your cards close to your chest. And so I think that's also where like the pay transparency movement that's happening. The girls on TikTok, I say girlies, to represent people of all gender. Anytime I talk about people on TikTok, I'm like, the girlies on TikTok said. But the people on TikTok who do the pay transparency videos, so healing. I want to kiss each and every one of them on the face because it's like through seeing that of like, watch me budget my $70,000 salary, my $50,000 salary, my $100,000 salary. It's becoming more normalized. We're able to see like, oh, these other people have debt. Oh, these other people, this is what their car payment's like. And we don't have that generally as a community sense of like normalization. So it's so easy to see this is what my financial situation looks like. This is what I quote unquote think it should look like because of people like Dave Ramsey or a conversation with an accountant 5 years ago or a conversation with my financial advisor who's like kind of holding you up on a pedestal. And so it's so easy to only feel shame because we don't have those like normalization experiences because we don't really talk about money with anyone.
Oh my gosh, that's such brilliant insight. If so much to say, that makes so much sense. So I'm extra glad we're having this conversation. I don't know about the girlies on TikTok thinking or talking about transparency. So thank you. I'm like total Gen Xer in that I need to be taught these things. So
Yeah. So how do we find these people? Do we search a hashtag?
Yeah.
Teach us. And there's probably people out there listening that also, because these sound amazing. I love this. I want to support these people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. You can do, what do they call it? They usually say like budget my paycheck with me or payday videos. I'm sure they're on Instagram as well if you're not on TikTok, but I adore them. There's a creator who I just recently followed who was getting out of $35,000 in credit card debt. Incredible. And she just documented her whole journey of like, this is how much I'm paying. I moved back home with my parents. And I think to your question earlier too, like she got a lot of people who were like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're talking about this because I have $20,000 of credit card debt. And I thought I was the worst person on the planet. And I thought I was such an idiot for having this much credit card debt. And then you also had people in the comments as well being like, you're so dumb. How could you have this much money in credit card debt? And so like you can see literally in the comment section the dichotomy of people being like, thank God, I'm so thankful that you're doing this. You're helping me see that like I can too get out of this money situation. And you also see those voices that we're so afraid of being like, you're an idiot with money. How could you do this? you're so dumb, you know, all of the things that we're afraid to hear when it comes to like money and like not managing our money well.
Wow. Yeah. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of social media and the
Interesting social dynamics that we find there. It is a topic. I talk to my sister a lot about this because she's a heavy user of actually Twitter, which is a whole other, I guess we call that X now. Sort of refuse to, but yeah. Um, so I will acknowledge, I just want to say that those voices of judgment, and this is for any of us that put ourselves out there on social media, because we probably will get voices of judgment. I certainly know that I have. Those are the voices of the patriarchy, that those are just, and I think a way to frame that is to, that might be helpful. And I'm sure there's a million ways that I think we need friends and support. I think we need scaffolding around ourselves when we post on social media to go to for support if things get weird. But also, like, when you see those voices, it just feels like confirmation that the work you're doing is powerful and needed, because what I hear, right, this transparency uh theme, I don't know, a trend is the word I'm looking for, is it's not either or. It's the third way or the fourth way or the fifth way, right? That it's creating our new world. Every time we do something outside that binary, we are absolutely energetically contributing to a new way of being on the planet. I always want people to feel empowered about that, because I think we can all feel so disempowered in general in this world sometimes. So anyway, I just get the chills. I love that so much. Thank you. That's so,
Yeah.
yeah. I love your
Yeah.
brilliance.
I love it so much. I think it's, again, like if you are just getting started, if you're in a place where you're like, I kind of want to start looking at my money, but it feels terrifying to me, the pay transparency like theme trend that is going on right now with social media is a great place to start. And I also want to say, like, if you are also in a place where you want to start getting better with money, what you don't have to do is start a TikTok and start posting about your financial situation online, because it's also very tough, kind of like you said. And so, like, just going back to what we said earlier of like when you are starting to forge a new path, start having a new relationship with money or have a new relationship with like your finances, we don't want to, kind of like what we said earlier, jump to the other end of that spectrum of like, I was super secretive with money and I didn't want to talk about it with anyone, so now I'm going to talk about it with everyone. What is usually the most supportive is to take, what's a baby step we can do? How can I start normalizing these conversations? How can I open up my bank account once a month now instead of like putting it off for months and months and then just checking it when it, you know, when things get emergency, you know, like finding those baby steps. Because again, like what you don't want to do is a shock to the system where you swing way to one side of the pendulum, burn out, burn it all down, and then go right back to where you are. But then with battle scars, right? That with, then it's
Battle
even,
scars,
those
yeah.
voices are even stronger because you're like, no, I did try and it was terrible. It was horrifying. I was ridiculed. I made a TikTok account. People were bullying me online. And so now I'm over here. And now the door's not just locked, it's like paddle locked, whatever. This is a weird analogy. Like I've bolted the door shut because I won't go through
Oh,
that again.
I think your analogy totally works. I get that. I think I see that happening. I see that happening uh, with clients, with friends. I've seen it happen with myself. So yeah, it's really, I love that, because again, I think you're lifting the veil so all of us can start seeing ourselves and seeing
The way we react to things, and understanding that really those reactions are reactions to these systems of inequities that we live under, that are feeding us a narrative that we're not questioning, and it's really time to question it. So in all the ways. And it just seems to me, you know, one of the reasons I did this podcast as Business as Activism is I feel like that cross section of patriarchy and capitalism is such a potent place for change. And I just want to also say, like, those are not the only two systems that work in our businesses. Like, I mean, it's all of the things, I think. So all systems of inequity, but I just think it's a really potent place. Um, for us to examine how we show up, what our thoughts are, what our actions are, and then what becomes possible when we even make small changes. So small hinges swing big doors is one of my favorite expressions. So, okay, so we all have money stories. Starting with our values, this is wonderful. Let's start with our values. How do we ask ourselves what our values are? In other words, that is also something that sometimes we have never articulated. So how do you help your clients think about what those values are?
Yeah, I love to, you can find values in a lot of different ways, but I find like similar to boundaries, it's very easy to see where the values are after you've crossed them or like when you're coming up against them. So like you might say like, you know, you have strong boundaries with your mother, and then when she comes kind of close to the fence, you're like, oh, that's where the line is because you're getting on my nerves a little bit. And I find that that's where values kind of identify the same or kind of in the same place. So like, and money's a tough place to start with them. So I usually start somewhere else of like, what's a like decision you made lately that feels like it was like really aligned? Or um I think a really good place if you are going to start with money is like, what is like a money decision that you made lately? And then like asking yourself more questions about why. So this is kind of where like my clients, I like get on their nerves a little bit. I'll admit that. But they'll tell me like, oh, I don't really want to raise my price on this kind of work, right? So I'm going to use another client example. So they have bears that they make, and they were like, I don't want to raise the price on the bears. And I was like, we don't have to raise the price on the bears, but I am interested. This is where, this is where they like roll their eyes at me a little bit. And I'm like, can you tell me more about why you don't want to raise the price on the bears, and kind of like following the rabbit hole down. And again, just like with everything else, you want to like watch for like the trigger to flip because it can very easily go from like an open-hearted conversation to like you see kind of like those walls going up. So always want to be aware of like, how are you feeling? You can tell me to STFU anytime, and we don't have to keep talking about this. But I am usually trying to like lead with those questions of like, why don't you want to raise the price on the bears? Or like, why are you afraid to raise your price past $100? And they're like, well, I just want it to be really affordable. I'm like, okay, that feels relatable. What are you afraid, like, what does like being unaffordable maybe mean to you? Or like, have you had an experience where someone was like, oh, this is too much money? What did that feel like to you? Kind of like digging into some of those values. And then I feel like a lot of times you'll find it's connected to connection, right? Like you are a part of a community, you want to serve that community, you want to feel really connected to that community and not leave it behind. Accessibility can be really important to people. Community can feel really important to people. Generosity can feel really important to people, but you don't necessarily know what those are until you kind of dig in and you're like, oh, that doesn't feel great. But why doesn't it feel great? Kind of like asking yourself more questions. And then, like anything with money work, with values work, with being an entrepreneur, you're never going to like, these are my values. It's these 5 things. And now I've got everything figured out. It's always going to be an evolving process. But I tend to look for those moments where I feel very strongly about something and see if I can ask myself more questions about why I feel that way. Because it's usually a value there, I found.
Yes, so much so. In fact, I was thinking one of my favorite questions is, well, how did you decide, or how do you know what affordable even is? And that's almost always a reflection of ourselves. And then let's also just say, for side note, it doesn't work. We're never going to be able to sell to everybody. And I want that to be okay. It has to be okay, because here's what's really beautiful. You sell to the people that like are your people, whoever that is. And trust me when I say the people over here that don't resonate with your work, maybe they can't afford it. There's people, there's artists and healers and coaches out there
that do resonate. So we need to spread the love anyway. Like we can't serve all the people. And so I love these questions so much.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation like that recently with a client because she, her market is mostly like queer, non-binary women and non-binary people and women. I would say mostly like queer here in Atlanta. And she was really struggling as well because she wants to raise more capital in the business. She has to buy stock, a bunch of other things. And she was like, I just feel like I'm going to have to sell out. I think she did use the word sell out, which is one of my favorite like words to kind of like, oh, there's something there. And she was like, and then go and work with like queer men because queer women don't make that kind of money. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I was like, like when you start to talk about it, then you can hear those subconscious beliefs. Sometimes they do like show their head and you're like, is that true? There are no queer women or non-binary people in Atlanta that make the kind of money to gift this to you, And so it's a good place to kind of like bring up those questions and look deeper.
Oh, I love that so much. Are you familiar with Byron Katie's work by any chance?
Yeah.
So, because I'm just, thinking of the 4 questions, which are, is that true? Can you absolutely know that that's true? Who are you being with that thought? Who would you be without that thought, to simplify? Because I think that is that those 4 questions are so powerful to me. I like them. So, oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you for using client examples, by the way. I think that's going to be really helpful for everybody here. I really appreciate it. I think I can see myself in every one of your examples that you've been using, so I'm sure the listeners can too. I wanted to switch just slightly, still around money, but I think that this example of the starving artist,
the not starving artist, and the sellout. So how I actually am just curious, and I bet you people are also curious about how is it, because I can tell I'm plugged into the starving artist thing a little bit. I have enough awareness to think, oh, well, that's not true and doesn't have to be true. And it would be helpful for me to hear, well, how do artists make money? It's not my world at all. I'm not an artist. And so what does that even look like? Because I find the art world really interesting and I love art. And I think beauty and art is essential to the human soul. And I think that bringing art into our world and supporting artists is magical and important. So how does an artist make money? And oh, hey, how about those of us that aren't multimillionaires? How do we afford art and where do we find that? Just to get curious. We're a little off track there, but I think it's a fun and good question to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this. I want to answer your second question first. My favorite place, because again, like I spend big money, like I said, every year on like artists, people in my community. Generosity, love. I think it starts by saying yes to the small stuff. You don't have to. Again, with the pendulum swing, I'm always like trying to talk people down from like huge leaps and being like, I have to fly to New York and spend $50,000 on a painting if I'm going to invest in art. But like, there are 1,000,001 little steps between you like flying to New York and investing in a huge piece. If you want to do it and that resonates with you, do it. Please tag me on Instagram because I will cheer you on in the comments. And it can be as easy as going to, I don't know if this is as popular where you are, but in my community, there's like a ton of little like artist markets or like craft markets. Usually right next to the farmer's market, there will be someone selling like jewelry, journals, ceramics, paintings. Like it can start that small. And I usually encourage people to start that small because it's community. And again, if community is not that important to you, feel free to start somewhere else. But I would say like, look for the opportunities that are already around you. And something that you brought up earlier is like, before you're aware of something, you have to notice something to start doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there usually
we don't know
are
what we don't know.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, there usually are opportunities all around you to invest in art, to hire artists, to bring more art into your life if that's something that you want to do. I would really encourage you to like something I love to do with affirmations and a lot of things in general is like put a little alarm on my phone. So like in the middle of the afternoon, I'm probably going to get one now. In the middle of the afternoon, that'll be like, art is all around me, you know? And it kind of opens, it takes you out of like whatever you're doing for the day. You're like tapping on your computer or taking your dog for a walk or whatever. It takes you kind of out of that moment and be like, oh, where is art around me? You know, it kind of like puts some perspective into it. And then I would almost guarantee that you'll find an artist that you love, that resonates with you, that you can support. So that's the first thing I'll say. And then
Love that.
how do artists make money? Artists make money in all kinds of ways, I'll say. I think, and this is also why I tell people like getting really clear on your values is so important. So like, I'll use photography as an example. I've worked with a lot of photographers in my year. There are lots of different photography that you can do. You can do families, you can do like business branding, you can do newborns, you can do lifestyle, you can do commercial, like working with large companies, you can do weddings. There's lots of different ways you can do that. And even if in one of those like subcategories, like weddings, for example, you can do small backyard weddings, you can do elopements, you can do courthouse weddings, you can do like very high end weddings. You can like marry Priyanka and Nick Jonas if you want. You can only work with people in your community who are getting married in their backyard, and it's 100 of their closest friends and family. And so none of those options are right or wrong. It's not better or worse to do 100 projects in a year or 5 projects in a year. It really, really depends on, and what I say all the time to my clients is like, you'll be the most successful doing the thing that you want to do instead of trying to do something and copy someone else's success. And I had to learn this in my own business too. So like not taking 100 clients at a time, working with 6 clients at a time because I really love them. We get super deep. I'm texting them, I'm sending them links. We're like going back and forth on Fox. It's a very high touch relationship, and I can't have those kind of relationships all the time, right? And so that's a lot to say, and it can feel very overwhelming, but I would just encourage people to say like, there are 1 million ways to make $1 million, getting really clear on your values, and honestly playing too is a big piece of it. Like sometimes you don't know until you know, you have to make 100 pieces, sell them all and be like, that was actually way too much volume, or I actually fucking loved that and I want to do this all the time and just do artist markets and sell a whole bunch of stuff and meet a whole bunch of people. And other people look at that and they're like, absolutely not. I will be in my studio. You can buy things from me online, so you kind of have to play around and see what feels really good to you. But I would also encourage you, like, as much as looking to see what other people are doing can be inspiring, it's not the only way to do what you want to do. I said a lot of things, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say, I love this. I'm going to reflect back. So I love this idea of starting local. I know here in San Francisco, down at the Embarcadero in front of the ferry building, for anybody that knows San Francisco, there's always artists out there. And I have bought from them, and I love looking at what they've created, and it's always fun. And so also just a light bulb, or maybe it's not that I didn't think it was art, but I think the volume's been turned up on that for me, just in you saying that, like, oh, this is me supporting artists in my community. And then just being aware, and I actually struggle with this sometimes, but there are ways to get newsletters and things that are happening in your community. So for example, I have the San Francisco Rec and Park email that I get. I'll just use San Francisco as an example. The Fort Mason, for anybody that doesn't live here, they're going to be like, who cares, Elijah? But it's just an idea. Like there's this space called Fort Mason, and on their email list, and they have events. So I'm just thinking out loud right now. And then I honestly, even though I know that Etsy has changed so much and is so much more commercial, I follow and have bought art and original art and prints from artists that are on Etsy. So, and I've heard that Etsy has just changed a lot more. Like somebody big bought it, I don't remember, but are there other sites like that if we want to do online shopping, you know, maybe the artists are going to, is Etsy still a good place for us to go to? I don't know how Etsy treats its artists actually.
I also know that Etsy got purchased by someone. I don't know who that person is off the top of my head. And I do wish I had a recommendation. I think a lot of people are kind of like, with the accessibility of like having an online store with things like Shopify and Squarespace that make it easier to like have your own thing and not depend on like one central place. Um, but I would also just say like following the clues too, I think is a really good thing. So like if you have an artist who maybe you follow on Instagram or you found them on their explore page, like click around. They probably also follow people who like resonate with you. You could find their stuff, get on their email list. There's also just online a lot of people who do a lot of great curation work of like someone who you think has great taste, who like sends a weekly email or newsletter that says like, here's some cool stuff that I saw this week, and kind of like look for those opportunities. And like I said, once you are kind of like on the lookout for them, you'll see them kind of everywhere. But I would say like those are like really good places to start, of like poke around on socials, follow, you know, get recommendations, ask people if you see some art out and about that looks cool, ask about the artist, follow them on Instagram, see if you can support them. Because I think once you start kind of following those clues, you'll find what you're looking for.
Yes, I love that. That's so obvious. It makes so much sense. I'm just thinking, okay, everybody go out today and post on whatever social media you use and ask your people to recommend artists to follow and tag Jillian and myself. So I want to see I want to see these posts, because let's start supporting artists. I love that. That sounds so fun. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk real quick about this idea of selling out. So how do we define people that are selling out? What's really going on there? Are people really selling out? How does our mindset and opinion and judgment about that affect our relationship with money?
Yeah, I would say the stereotype of the sellout is, I think too, when you talk about it, you can like really see how it ties to values. They care more about the money than the art. They value status maybe over like relationships. So like status is really tied there. They maybe aren't kind. They treat people badly. They're like, I have this like image in my mind of like snooty, wears all black, doesn't tip you at the coffee shop,
Yeah.
like, but sells their work for millions of dollars. And you're like, that guy sucks. That guy just sucks. And like our perceptions of it because of those, and like you can see the values there of like not kind, values money over art. I forgot the third thing I said. So then we don't want to be like that, right? So we are caring way more about the art than the money, maybe so much so that we ignore the money part totally.
Right.
We're giving away our work for free, or so discounted that we're like going in the red doing it. We are over kind, we're over giving, we are negotiating with clients, maybe our customers, about a rate. They're like, we sell this thing for $50, which is maybe already under what we should be charging for it. They're like, oh, I can't do 50, could you do 25? We're over giving in that regard. And like kindness, like we want people to think that we're so kind, so nice. We don't want anyone to say like, oh, they're too expensive, or oh, they're not like us. We want to be a part of the group, you know, whereas I think the sellout has maybe like a highfalutin attitude and doesn't really care what you think about them.
I actually think that piece that you just said about community and belonging has got to be such a big factor. If I'm an artist that is not a sellout and I start making money, do I still belong to my group? Yeah, I can imagine that kicks some stuff up.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And so then I think even harder trying to toe this line of like, I want to make enough money to pay my bills, buy groceries, continue to do my art in a sustainable way. Yeah. But I can't get too successful because then I'll be outed from the group. So you're kind of like towing this line. It's like a very thin line that you're able to do. So like a great affirmation, I'm actually working on this myself, is like, it's safe to be seen as successful or something like
Oh,
that, right? Like, what does that
yes.
bring up for you? You know, like when I said that, did you just like want to throw up a little? Like maybe that's a good, like, this is always where I get on my
Yeah.
clients nervous, and I'm like, that's a great place to start then, of like, what is it then? Like, why does it feel unsafe? Or if it unsafe isn't the word, does it feel selfish? Does it feel mean? Does it feel like what is that word that comes up for you? And like do a little bit of like digging about like how maybe to release some of that grip that success, or like the fear of success, quote unquote, has for you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking also, how are we defining success? Certainly, certainly from a financial standpoint. And Kelly Deals always says, if the feminist running the business isn't making money, it's not a feminist business. We actually need to make a living and pay our bills. And to circle back to where we started, not cause harm to ourselves in while we honor our values. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is so, speaking of values and valuable, this conversation is so valuable. Thank you so much. Um, and what, let's, as we wrap things up, I'm curious if you can share. I want to know so many things. So I'm like, okay, I wish we had more, well, maybe we could have a second conversation at some point, but I'm thinking, and you can help me out here, because I want to ask, in some ways, I want to ask, what's the vision you hold for us all out here, the creative entrepreneurs, and what are some things? And the thing is, you've already given us things to do and think about, but is there anything else you want to add to that that maybe we can go journal about right now, or I don't know, think about, or start inserting into our practice and our money stories, and obviously how people can work with you. You can share that with us too. Very important. So yeah, it's a lot. Sorry, I just put a lot out there.
No,
Whatever,
I love it.
whatever
I
comes
love
to
it.
mind.
Yeah, I love this conversation so much. And like that's why I wanted to be on this podcast. I saw your post and I was like, oh, I could talk about this for days. So like we'll just go ahead and book it on the calendar. Um, I think my vision is for like creative entrepreneurs, especially, is like, oh, I'm like tearing up a little bit. I want you to be the rich artist in someone's mind when when their partner says like, oh, I wish people made great money doing art, you know? I want you to be that example. And I think when you think of it like that, I'm like, I'm not gonna cry on this. When you
Brian's
think
okay.
of it,
I'm okay with it.
yeah, when you think of it from that perspective, it's, to me at least, and I've done a lot of work around this and I've been in this business for a long time, but I think it's generous, it's kind, it's inspiring. It's like when you meet someone and they're like lit up by life, they're loving what they do. You're like, oh yeah, Elijah, like when I talked to her, she lit me up. And I'm so glad that she's doing the work that she is here to do on the planet. And I want, when people think about you and your work and your art, them to think the same thing. Like, wow, Sarah is like making great money. She takes great care of herself and her partners. They have the cutest house, the cutest dog. They go on vacation. Her work is so cool. Like, I want that for you. And I want that for all of us. And I think that's what gets me so excited and like so pumped up about talking to artists. And I hope that that feels inspiring to you. I hope it's not that you hear that and you're not like, oh, I don't want to be a sellout. I want you to be honestly like almost like a flower. And I hate to use like those analogies because I feel like flowers get like a weird, I don't know if you've ever heard like the virginity flower talk. It's weird. But like I want you to be we're not gonna get into it. I want you to be like fully blossomed in your art and get to do all of the things that you're put on this planet to do. And so I would say that's my vision. I want you to be the rich artist in someone's mind when someone says something like that. Um, and then I think if you're not there, if you're like, no one knows how hot and rich and successful I am as an artist, and I want more people to know about that, then I want you to, or you're like, I want to grow to that, then I want you to, number one, look for more people who can be that for you, of like, who is someone in my community or a friend of a friend who's like, maybe not even all the way there yet, but can help me hold on to that vision a little bit closer. Someone who's like maybe a little bit further down the line than me, who's open, who's kind, who's doing what they love, who's making great money. And how can I like be around them a little bit more? Because I do think that brings us out of our shell more. The third thing I'm going to say is, I guess to that same point, like look for artists, look for art in your life, look for the opportunities, the people who are making great money, doing what they love to do, how you can support them, how you can be with them, how you can support them on their art journey. As we've talked so long about, I'm a huge fan of art. I'm a huge fan of artists. I love what people do. I love getting to be a part of it. I love commissioning a big piece. I love hanging it up in my house. You can't see because it's like the wall that's behind you, but I have a whole bunch of art on my wall and I just love looking at it. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you want to work with me, you can follow me on Instagram at _Jillian Todd. And my website is getmoneyconfident.com, because that's what I help people do.
And
this has been awesome. I'm so like,
Yeah.
I guess I'm through the moon.
let's have more conversations. I think that we just scratched the surface. I also want to just tell everybody that links to Jillian are going to be in the podcast notes, so super easy to find her. And I have to say, so I want to say two things that you brought to mind, and then okay. So the first thing is,
Yes,
you gave an example of an artist named Sarah, just as you were, and so I have a client named Sarah Jane. So then and she's an artist. And so I'm going to shout out Sarah Jane at Poison Rain Productions on Instagram. And I'm totally going to put a link to her because we got to support our people. And the other thing I thought of, oh dear, please mind, don't forget what I was going to say. I don't remember. So here, I'm just going to model total imperfection right now because it just left my mind. So yay, Sarah Jane, yay, artists. And I'm going to assume it's just going to be for our next conversation.
I love it. I can't wait.
I can't wait. I literally just left a Voxer for a client of mine. We were talking, she also has a podcast, and she was like so many of us, thinking, being a bit of a perfectionist, like so many of us. And I said, there's hardly a podcast that goes by where I will forget what I'm saying mid-sentence. And look, it just happened. I made it almost through. Okay. You're wonderful. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your generosity with everything you shared with us today is really great. So thank you. Come back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you for letting me chat on and on about artists and money and all of the ways that plays out, because it's just so important. And like we said, no one really talks about it. So anytime I have a chance to like go on and on about artists and money, I love it. It's great.
I feel exactly the same way. And I think we're changing the world. So let's keep doing that. It's so important.
Amazing.